I was in a game drought. You know the feeling. There are games we play because we gotta play something, and it's better this than nothing. You get stuck here long enough, you start drifting back to television and Snapchat, but you know that's not where you belong. So you try this and that, new free games on Steam, recommendations from friends or Reddit. So many Tinder dates grasping at straws, desperate to feel that spark you felt before. Some games hope with fancy graphics and $100 million marketing campaigns they'll win you over with sheer force, like the sugar daddy pumping away furiously while you're making grocery lists in your head wondering when he'll finish. And meanwhile, what you're really thirsting for is that game that will finally grab you by the balls and punish you for looking at anything else. That holds you down and makes you come till your calves cramp, ravaging you like the desperate slut you hope polite society and your friends at brunch never find out you truly are. I'm looking for the kind of game that scares the industry, starves other franchises, and fucks up stocks. The kind of game that threatens civilization, kids cutting class, teachers getting fired, power linemen burning down California after they show up to work on 2 hours of sleep, MLB players walking on field with carpal tunnel syndrome they developed in 7 days, Korean knife fights, divorce, health epidemics, and threats to global GDP. Secretly, we're all just looking for the kind of game that will fuck up our lives and everybody else's. I'd come crawling back to COD like the godforsaken lonely hoe that I am. He's been in and out of jail 6 times, and he goes through my purse while I'm sleeping, but at least he knows my G-spot. He's on top, and I am dead inside, but then boom! Someone kicks in the front door. Police! Walks in and blows my lover's brains out. Mounts me, and we make love, and the bloody remains and bits of gray matter. My game drought is over. Out of nowhere, Apex Legends leaked. 48 hours later, it had dropped. Within 3 days, it had 10 million players. Within 5 days, 25 million. And at this point, has hit 50 million players. Doing so much faster than Fortnite. It was the most watched game on Twitch, where it remained for some time. It's getting perfect review scores from critics. I know I found a good game when I feel guilty about last night's bedtime. I was playing with my cousin's clan, the Scragglers, a bunch of grown-ass men yucking it up about feeling guilty for neglecting their wives, jobs, and children. Yeah, it sounds like my kind of game. In an industry that so often disappoints, it's important to pay attention when a game pleasantly surprises. After all, there are plenty of Battle Royale games at this point. Why is this one blowing up and not just considered another ripoff? Why is Respawn's latest entry doing so well when its previous 2 major releases fizzled out despite receiving similar critical acclaim? There have been several indications this game is taking off faster and is poised to potentially become as big as or even bigger than Fortnite. A game which many analysts agree has had a massive, disruptive impact on the entire industry, permanently reshaping it. If the release of Apex Legends has a similar effect, showing that Fortnite wasn't a one-off freak accident but just the first in a trending avalanche set to obliterate any last scrap of the industry's last decade, does this game signal the end of an era and the beginning of a new one? It was, after all, much of the talent at Respawn Entertainment that arguably ushered in the previous era with COD 4. Have they done it again? The most fascinating thing about Apex's success is the abrupt way it released, with less than 48 hours of hype or advertising. This stands in stark contrast to what has become conventional marketing with every other game, where we know about the game 6 to 18 months in advance, where before its release we've seen an announcement trailer, E3 trailer, multiplayer trailer, single-player trailer, first 15 minutes of gameplay, endgame footage, and all the gameplay in between from literally hundreds of hours of streamers and tubers footage. The modern marketing campaign has become the movie trailer that basically tells you so much it almost defeats the purpose of going to see the movie yourself. It's also why so many games feel like disappointments, because even a great game will often begin to fizzle in your imagination 2 months in, and when you look back and realize you spent more time being hyped for the game than you did actually playing it, you feel a little bit silly and misled. It's like in politics, how before an election or a debate, a candidate's surrogates are always trying to downplay expectations, because then if their candidate sucks eggs, it's not that big of a deal, but if he pwns noobs, it is. Game publishers seem to do the opposite. They spend months talking up their candidate like he's fucking Cicero, and then all too often they send out Rick Perry.
Oops.
If they had come out and told the world that this was a BR ripoff Titanfall game but without titans or wall running and loot box microtransactions, it would have been dead on arrival. The internet's cynicism would have kneecapped it long before release, but without 6 months of snarky Reddit comments to define it in the public's imagination, people simply got to experience it for themselves, and they liked what they saw because the game has to rely purely on its gameplay quality. It's worth pointing out that the other juggernaut of our time, Fortnite Battle Royale, was hyped and released in a very similar way. Small marketing campaign, limited media interest, but then it blew up almost entirely on its gameplay quality. Is this the end of behemoth blockbuster marketing campaigns? Are we approaching a future in which E3 is irrelevant and instead we live every day in breathless anticipation, knowing that at any random moment an incredible landscape-altering game could drop out of nowhere like a bolt of lightning and change everyone's lives forever? Without the industrial hype complex there to salvage sales if it flopped, Apex blew up purely because of its gameplay. Many critics have been all too quick to chalk up Apex's success to a collection of little things. Yes, the ping system is a sick innovation that every BR should have had years ago. Yes, sliding is dope and the jump master mechanic makes for a much smoother BR experience. But it's not the little things that have allowed this game to excel. Apex success is rooted in having found the perfect middle ground between Fortnite's wackiness and PUBG's intensity. Fun is a fickle concept, difficult to define and measure. It's why reviewing games is so hard, why so many reviews get it so wrong so often, why so many players have to find their one niche critic. Two players can look at the exact same game and have diametrically opposed reactions. As I see it, PUBG and Fortnite have always sat on complete opposite ends of the battle royale spectrum. For any given player, what is fun in one is repulsive in the other. PUBG is a bare-bones tactical shooter. Its game mechanics are minimalist, its experience is super consistent from one match to the next, its joy is in the thrill of difficult, high-octane, concentrated gunfighting, and only difficult, high-octane, concentrated gunfighting, which is how many players prefer it. It's why COD titles so often include an entire set of bare-bones playlists that disable any mechanics that allow people to get kills by means other than winning a gunfight. Meanwhile, Fortnite is a whack-a-daddle doodle fest. Increasingly absurd game mechanics, novel, experimental, hectic, and unpredictable, the building and destruction exponentially diversifying the gameplay and combat scenarios you find yourself in. In PUBG, you can often predict what the next 90 seconds of combat will look like. I will push up to this tree, he may try and nade me there, or push to my right, etc. In Fortnite, you often never have any idea what the next 90 seconds will look like. Is this guy going to build 50 blocks in the air and jump off with a hoverboard to snipe me in the head? Or are we just going to rush each other with shotties, screaming like hyenas? Anything can happen at any moment, and often does. The Fortnite player thinks PUBG is dull, while the PUBG player thinks Fortnite is dumb. Apex threads the needle between both. The hero abilities add a dimension of batshit. Fights constantly evolving in the chaos of airstrikes, smoke screens, gas traps, teleporters, and bubble shields, keeping things unpredictable and fresh, allowing the clever player to innovate and coordinate their gameplay, gassing a building's interior after calling an airstrike on it, smokescreen and pulse vision to fuck up blinded enemies, and of course my favorite, baiting enemies into your teleporter, only for them to find a firing squad lined up on the other side. All kinds of clever plays and super chaotic encounters, unpredictable, the thrill of having no idea what's going on or what's going to happen next. It's fun, but not overdone, as it's become in Fortnite, where as time went on and streamers became popular, everyone became addicted to building, and even 1v1 encounters often devolved into pissing contests to see who could get their 1x1 tower the highest the fastest, where every fight became less and less about the gunfighting and more about the fort building, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it's how it's supposed to be, but it's a turnoff to players who are more interested in the shooter appeal than the Minecraft aspect. Epic may have recognized this. You'll notice a great deal of the updates they rolled out in 2018 were designed to dampen the prevalence of buildings, miniguns, LMGs, C4s, not to mention the across-the-board reduction to resource gathering in general. There were a lot of players, myself included, who felt the game strayed too far from its core shooter mechanics. Like, bro, I'm not interested in playing Bob the Builder with some fuckwit 10-year-old who I know will win because he had all this practice on games I never bothered picking up like Minecraft and Roblox. Not to mention the copious hours I know they've spent watching Ninja, who might as well be this generation's version of the fucking Wiggles. Apex is able to have the creative mechanics and a diverse set of potential combat encounters that gives it a leg up on PUBG, which essentially has no mechanics more interesting or unique than throwing a grenade. But it's not so overdone to a point of obnoxiousness that takes away from the gunplay like in Fortnite. I think it's important to understand this. As this industry so often pumps out hyped up games that turn out to be really rather dull, reviewers, players, and developers have to do a better job of understanding what fun is. Apex isn't fun because of the ping system or the sliding, it's the mechanics and how they are scaled to provide the best of both worlds relative to the two extremes on either end of the battle royale market right now. But for people to experience that gameplay for themselves on such a wide scale, for the limited marketing to have worked, this game had to have been free to play. Otherwise, not nearly as many people would have even tried it. With games like Apex and Fortnite using the F2P model to blow past competitors like Black Ops 4 and Battlefield 5 that are outspending them on production and marketing 25-1, it's hard to imagine this isn't the model most games will have to adopt going forward. But is that a good thing? Don't get me wrong, I love getting free games that are funded by dumbasses who drop hard-earned money on in-game cosmetics they won't care about in a few months. But there's a wider implication here that many analysts are missing. I recently read an article about economic inequality and how it's shaping modern markets. It detailed how as the gulf between consumer classes continues to widen, that's being reflected in the kinds of companies that thrive or die. Basically, the companies doing great today are the ones catering to the poor, like the dollar store, or the ones catering to the very wealthy, like Amazon Go. Meanwhile, companies like Sears that traditionally appeal to the middle class are getting wiped out. You can see this dynamic being played out in our games as well. After all, what are microtransactions if not virtual dollar stores? Not everyone can comfortably afford that many $60 titles, but everyone can drop a few bucks here and there on some dumb shit. At the same time, we know the microtransaction model is also designed to profit off what the industry calls whales, individuals willing to drop thousands of dollars on skins. Thus, the microtransaction system is perfectly suited to the age of income inequality, giving the poor something they can afford and the rich a bottomless pit to sink their excess dough into. Though I ought to mention there have been recorded instances in which whales aren't rich, but just really dumb poor people. Inequality would also explain the rise of the Mega Deluxe Special Collector's Edition crap. Absurd excuses to milk excessively wealthy people for $400 on a $60 game. Thus we see the rise of free-to-play microtransactions and deluxe edition culture, while the standard $60 titles of the past are clearly struggling, with more and more of those kinds of titles being cancelled, scaled back, or simply flopping, seemingly going the way of Sears. More and more studios are being shut down, developers laid off en masse. The articles mention that even though the lower classes are technically spending less money, they aren't necessarily getting better value. To quote the Washington Post, often the low prices are maintained by shrinking the package size, resulting in less bang for the buck. In other words, this is stuff purchased by people who need to stretch their money to make it last to the next paycheck. People who can't afford to look for the best bargain. Could this be taking place in our games as well? Gamers are still spending a lot of money, often still end up spending $60 on in-game items. But the question is, when it's all said and done, are they actually getting more value out of their collection of skins and emotes than they would out of an actual new game like Red Dead 2 or Spider-Man? Are they getting as many hours played out of Fortnite and Apex as they might out of all the games that have gotten squeezed out since those games blew up? Undoubtedly some are, but then some certainly couldn't be. The fact is, if you don't care for Battle Royale very much, then the ongoing success of these titles, and the way they're muscling out so many other games, is likely a net negative for you, ultimately damaging the options available to your gaming diet, even more so now that every non-BR game is rushing to become one itself. Just as in real life we have lost Sears and other middle-class stores, gradually limiting the bottom two-thirds of America to options like dollar stores, are we losing something similar in our gaming? When we look at the increasingly dire outlook for games that simply can't rely on free-to-play microtransactions, such as story-driven or single-player games being cancelled because not enough people are willing to dish the $60, and who's going to buy in-game items in a game that has no other players, and in which acquiring the in-game items through gameplay is supposed to be like the whole point of the game anyways? Right now, major publishers are struggling to hit their quarterly profit targets, all uniformly blaming Fortnite. If it's inflicting $100 million losses on juggernauts like EA, you have to wonder what kind of effect it's having downstream, on smaller publishers, on indie devs. How many games and studios are being snuffed out of existence by the free-to-play juggernaut and its bullshit cosmetics? At the same time, many argue that games like Fortnite are growing the entire industry, benefiting everyone as a rising tide lifts all boats. But imagine if the billions of dollars that have been spent on Fortnite skins and emotes had instead been spent on actual video games. How many games might not have had to have been cancelled? How many games might exist today that don't? Are we trading a more diverse industry for a cheaper, more homogenous one? If Apex Legends only accelerates this trend, will its success come at a steep price? The For the Win query of the day is, do you think free-to-play Battle Royale is a net positive or negative for the industry, and or you as an individual? Thanks for watching. This is Batman, signing out.